Hey everyone, CJ here. I would like to do something a little different today and talk about role-playing monk. The monk is a pretty popular Dungeons & Dragons class. It has been part of D&D since the first edition. Even my monk class guide video is one of the most popular video in the class guide series. Frankly, it is easy to see why monks are so popular because look at all these crazy stunts. Who doesn't want to be badass like these? The problem with monks though is that while it is easy for people to understand the physicality and the general concept, what a lot of people don't really understand is the narrative significance of the monk. I have seen a lot of people complain on forums saying that monk player characters are usually quite boring because their characters revolve around the tired old tropes of revenge seeking, death of a master, burnt villages or monasteries, and so on. People just don't know what story to tell with their monk character and how to roleplay them. So that's why I made this video. I guess the main reason that people don't know how to roleplay monks is that Kung Fu and martial arts media isn't as popular as it used to be. Back in the 70s, when Dungeons & Dragons was first created, Kung Fu movies were immensely popular. It was the heyday of Bruce Lee movies like Enter the Dragon and Shaolin movies like 36 Chamber of Shaolin. Obviously, you can see the inspiration for the monk class here. The Shaolin Temple has been the most famous temple in Kung Fu and Wuxia lore since forever. Nowadays, this sort of media is less mainstream, at least in United States. Some people may have seen a few old classics here and there, a couple of new ones, and some animes. But there are less and less people who are familiar with the genre. It is impractical to make you all sit through thousands and thousands of hours of these kind of movies, series, and their remakes. So I am going to strip them all down to their very core and tell you what you need to know about Kung Fu and Wuxia, so that you can tell a better story as a monk player or a dungeon master. These two genres are closely associated with each other. The superficial way of differentiating the two is that Wuxia is usually set in ancient China. It has more fantastical elements and the heroes and villains can fly and shoot ki energy out of their hands. Kung Fu, on the other hand, is often set in a time period closer to ours, and the martial arts featured are more down to earth. But if you want to look closer, you will discover that many of the elements from these two genres overlap, mostly the philosophical underpinning of the two. Kung Fu is the heart and soul of Wuxia. It is a philosophy, it's not just the name of Chinese martial arts. In fact, I would go as far as to say that Karate Kid is essentially a Kung Fu movie, and so is the movie Wanted. I will explain these later, but the point is that Kung Fu does not have to be about combat. Let's look at the Wuxia genre first. The word Wuxia is composed out of two Chinese characters. Wu means martial or military, Xia means hero or knight errant. Together, it means martial hero. Heroes who perform righteous deeds through the use of their martial prowess. That sounds familiar, isn't it? It is a lot like adventurers in Dungeons & Dragons. Even though heroism and righteousness can be a foreign concept for some D&D players. The Wuxia genre has a lot of tropes that can be transplanted into a D&D setting. It is a goldmine for inspiration, especially the Xianxia subgenre that also features gods, demons, spirits, and monstrous creatures like giant centipedes. The hero's powers are also equally fantastical. How would you defeat a giant centipede, you ask? Well, the answer is obvious, isn't it? Just use your ki power to serve on your sword and ram the whole lot in. Before getting into the philosophical underpinnings of the genre, let me explain some of the Wuxia tropes that's already used by the monk class so that you can understand it better. This kind of sword surfing stunt is explained by the usage of ki or chi, depending on the language you use. It's the internal life force energy that can be cultivated through the practice of qigong. It is a catch-all power source that can be used to explain away any impossible magic-like stunts. Even in D&D, the designers know about their source material enough to use ki as the universal resource that fuels the monk's class features. It is tremendously versatile and can be used imaginatively. It can be used to turn ball bearings into bullets or harden strings into something tougher than steel chains. But the most important thing that you have to remember is that It is something that's developed and practiced. They are not something that people are born with. These people have to do the work to earn the power. Another common trope in wuxia that's virtually never explained is all that flying people. How in the world does this happen? The problem here is that the creator of these stories took it for granted that viewers are well versed in the genre enough to know that they are practicing qigong. It is a common skill in every wuxia, where the practitioners use their ki to reduce their body weight to the point where they can bound really high into the sky and even fly. The Step of the Wind class feature replicates this to a certain extent, but obviously not as exaggerated for the purpose of game balance. Stunning Strike is a representation of the pressure points trope. It is based on a principle in traditional Chinese medicine that by blocking the ki flow of a person, it is possible to stun or disable him. When used by a highly skilled practitioner, it can be tremendously lethal. As you can see here, when the bride uses the 5-point palm exploding heart technique in Kill Bill, or how Kenshiro explodes his enemies' heads in the Fist of the North Star. What is missing in D&D though is the concept of 走火入魔 or qigong deviation. This usually happens through improper meditation and qigong practices. The effects are almost always detrimental. The practitioner may go into coma, become disabled, or even go berserk. But sometimes, something really interesting can happen. They may turn to the dark side of their martial arts, like how Ryu from Street Fighter turns into evil Ryu. In a popular wuxia series, Legend of the Condor Heroes, the main antagonist was taught a secret martial arts technique backwards. It was a trick used by the kidnapped heroine to fool the villain and turn him insane. But unexpectedly, it also made him stronger than anyone could have ever imagined. In D&D, there are Oathbreaker paladins, but I think Wizards of the Coast should really incorporate deviant monks into the system. Monks who gain unexpected power through failed meditation practices. Well, even if Wizards never get around to it, this can be a great role-playing inspiration. You can play a monk whose skills are all learned the wrong way, and you develop weird quirks. The tropes here are pretty easy to understand. You only need to watch a handful of movies to get it. But there is a philosophical dimension in the wuxia narrative that you can only get if you are familiar with the genre. Contrary to the image of a collective society that produced the wuxia fiction, the wuxia hero actually highly values personal freedom and fight for what they themselves believe to be righteous. In many novels and fictions, there are usually a few stable factions: the Shaolin, Wudang, Ermei, and so on. Sometimes they are called sects or cults because many of those factions are religiously coded. However, none of them are constantly depicted as the good one. Due to the cyclical nature of history as viewed by the Buddhist culture, an evil faction might be reformed and become good in the sequel. Like the image of yin and yang, even in a good faction, there are evil hiding within. So the wuxia hero often has to become the maverick, someone who eventually has to go up against every single faction to uphold his or her own righteous ideals. You are not going to get a hero if all your monk does is follow the monastery's biddings. If you do that, you are really just playing an NPC. Of course, not all monks have to be the maverick. It would get equally boring if all of them are rebels without cause. But consider what they really believe in and how their monastery's practices might affect their own sense of justice. Self-determination is a core principle of wuxia and also the Kung Fu genre. Now, this segues us nicely to the topic of Kung Fu. As I have said before, Kung Fu is the heart of the wuxia genre. Most wuxia heroes are Kung Fu heroes too. Kung Fu is commonly known as Chinese martial arts, but that word Kung Fu has a lot more meaning than that. It also means skill, art, workmanship, and most importantly, effort. So that's why even calligraphy and cooking are also considered as valid expressions of Kung Fu. Without taking away the cultural significance of Japanese martial arts karate, I would say even Karate Kid is a Kung Fu film, and I'm not talking about that Jaden Smith remake. Of course, hard work and effort is not enough to create a Kung Fu narrative. If it is just about training harder, then even Rocky would be a Kung Fu film. there are two other conditions that need to be fulfilled to create a Kung Fu narrative. First is that you have to be the one who imposed the ordeal upon yourself. It is not about who is the strongest combatant. A Spartan can be a formidable warrior, but he had no say over the harsh training regimen he is subjected to when he was young. The Kung Fu hero is someone who chooses a path of hardship and stick with it. Uma Thurman's character in Kill Bill, the bride, could abandon Pai Mei's tutelage at any time. But even after she had crushed her knuckles and couldn't feed herself properly, she did not give up. Yes, Rocky trained out of his own volition. That's remarkable in its own way. He gets stronger, but that's it. To the Kung Fu hero, on the other hand, the training is also a form of meditation, and they emerge out of it by experiencing Satori. Satori is a Zen Buddhist term which means acquiring a new point of view in our dealing with life and the world. It is a metamorphosis of paradigm. They learn new truths from their training and innovate a new way of doing things. In Return to the 36th Chamber, the main character never received any formal training from the Shaolin Temple. But he had developed a new form of Kung Fu after spending all his time there working on the scaffolding around the temple. The same goes for Wesley in Wanted, when he finally learned the impossible skill of curving the bullet after all the assassin training he had received. So, when you come across a formidable fighter, you can't be sure how he or she got there. Maybe he is naturally talented, or he has survived the worst trial imaginable to man. You just know that he is tough. But when you come across a formidable monk, you can safely bet that he or she had attained that power by deliberate choice. And with their moral clarity, they are like an irresistible force of nature. Their life philosophy is also reflected by their fighting style. This also opens up a lot of opportunity for roleplay and character building through the description of your character's attacks. In the movie Hero, the assassin in green, named Broken Sword, crossed weapons with the tyrant King of Qin, the man who was to conquer the Sixth Kingdom to become the first emperor of China. Through the handling of his sword and the weight of his strike, the assassin could read into the king's psyche and determine that this tyrant has what it takes to achieve that goal quickly. Countless lives will be lost in the process, but it will finally put an end to the hellish, centuries-long war that will reap even more lives. It is a utilitarian solution no other kings can provide. So, choosing the lesser of the two evils, the assassin abandoned his mission. Think about what does your monk character's signature attacks look like, and what does it reveal about the character's personality. The best thing about Unarmed Strike is that it leaves you with a lot of freedom to describe your attacks and express your character's personality. One last thing that you should know about the Kung Fu narrative is that it provides a power fantasy that's antithetical to the superhero narrative. There are exceptions, but superheroes are usually given their powers first. They got it before they learn the responsibility to handle them. Conversely, the Kung Fu hero do not get their power until they have earned it. It is a narrative of hope, which imagines that everyone can become powerful and successful as long as they work towards it. It's like the American dream to the extreme. If you are blind, hone your instincts and you can become kick-ass blind swordsman. If you have lost an arm, you just have to move faster and fight smarter. I don't want to tell you how to play your character or create your setting, but if you want to create a great Kung Fu narrative, be wary of using prophecies. It reduces your character's agency and cheapens the eventual achievement. Imagine how much more interesting would Aang in Avatar: The Last Airbender be if there is no such thing as the Avatar and he achieves everything due to sheer hard work and determination. You often see the Chosen One trope get mixed in with Kung Fu in Hollywood, but that is a big mistake. Maybe because Hollywood thinks that their Western audience is more receptive to the Chosen One trope, because it is derived from the Jesus narrative. It is an interesting narrative on its own. I can maybe talk about it in the future, but those two narratives are polar opposites. When they are put together, one of them is always shafted in the process, rendering one of them to be completely flimsy. The Kung Fu narrative is actually one of those universal narratives that can fit many molds. A lot of shonen anime series are based on this, and to a certain extent, Dungeons & Dragons itself. The idea of leveling up and power spikes at certain class levels is as kung fu as it gets, but it is a natural fit for the monk. Sure, when you make your character, you don't have to create the perfect wuxia or kung fu hero. It is a role-playing game after all. You can create a monk that is completely devoid of those virtues. But you should at least use those concepts as a measure. How much of a wuxia or kung fu hero do you want your monk to be? Full kung fu, or the complete opposite? A lazy bum who becomes strong by being lazier? It is up to you. Use these genres as point of reference. Alright, enough rambling. Hope you have found this video to be useful and you have learned more about the monk class. If you like this video, remember to thumb it up, subscribe and share. And comment below if you want more videos like this from me. CJ, over and out.